Hello and welcome to Zero Hanger TV. We are kicking off our trade targets series where we'll break down some trade targets for each team, starting in alphabetical order. To do that with me is Mr. Mitch Keating, our AFL Chief Editor. How you going, mate?
Hey, mate. Good. How are you?
Good. Okay, so we're about halfway through the season. For some teams, like Adelaide, it might already be over. Looking at some trade targets for them, what do they need?
They would. They've certainly flagged that they'll be aggressive. So that means that they could be adding to areas where they're already pretty strong. But you'd like to think they'll focus on maybe midfielders, maybe some key position options, ruck support, key defender. But at the same time, maybe even just local guys, South Australians, off contract or not. We saw them make a move for Harrison Petty last year, even though he had a couple of years to go on his contract, and a pretty big one as that. And we'll probably touch on him as well on their list, but. They've missed out on a couple already this year and guys that they had been linked to. So that's, Will Hayward, South Australian, who's re-signed with Sydney. His teammate, Errol Gulden, was said to have a 10-year deal in front of him by the Crows before he re-signed.
South Australian?
No, he's from New South Wales. He was a Sydney Academy kid. So, like I said, they'll get aggressive. And same with Hugh McCluggage, who is probably along with Errol Gulden, the type of fit that they want in that midfield, a bit more run. It's probably a little too one-dimensional outside of maybe Jordan Dawson. Like Jake Saligo's come along pretty well to start the season. But I think when you've got Laird and Crouch and a couple others in there, it's probably just a bit one-paced, and they probably just want a bit more run, as we're kind of seeing the game transition to, is a lot more speed and movement on the ball. So that's certainly an area that they'll look at. And then, like I said, maybe a ruckman too. Obviously the ruck department's in a bit of a funny position. They've dropped Riley O'Brien and brought in Kieran Strawn, while Riley Thilthorpe's out injured. And Thilthorpe's the one for the future, but do they still want a dedicated first string ruckman, and Thilthorpe kind of plays that forward ruck role, or is he their long-term ruck option? That way they might have to look for a key forward, but they certainly want to add to their ruck stocks, you'd think, just given where O'Brien's at the moment. So that's certainly an area. And then I think key position at either end as well certainly wouldn't hurt them. And maybe, like I said, just some good ball movement, whether that's through the middle or more serviceable players all across the ground. So there's a bit for them to work on, as we've seen, given their pretty poor start to the season. But as they've flagged well before this year, a year that many thought they would be making the jump into finals, that they were going to be very aggressive. Not going to make risky calls, but certainly want to make a splash in the off season. So there's as compared to most other clubs we'll probably do in this series, Adelaide's going to be a bit of an outlier in the fact that we're probably going to be looking at some pretty big names, as opposed to others that might be those bargain, role players. I think Adelaide are going to be looking at players who can come in and have a pretty big impact straight away.
Yeah, beautiful. Okay, so first one, probably. In hindsight, Demons probably should have let that trade go through last year. So Harrison Petty.
Yeah, I've given some of the numbers that were around the deal and what might have been offered to Melbourne. Yeah, you're right in given what his output's been this year for Melbourne as a forward. They're still backing him in and know that it's going to take a bit of time, just given their whole forward mix is still kind of needing to gel when they haven't really played together much. And now that they've thrown Dan Turner forward as well, so it's a work in progress. But if Adelaide had successfully made that move, offered the amount of money that they were said to have, and used him as a forward, and they were getting the output that Melbourne are, then Crows fans would be pretty frustrated, just like I'm assuming Melbourne fans are as well. But no reason they can't come around for him again this year. He's still contracted until the end of next year, obviously. But what's worked in Adelaide's favour is that his value has certainly dropped in the last 9 months since they went to pursue his services. So you'd like to think that while a trade would have to be agreed still, that Melbourne probably aren't going to be asking for as much as they might have been last year. But like I said, they still value him quite highly. It's just a matter of how Adelaide want to use him. Would they use him as a key defender? They probably don't need one as much as they would probably like some more forward help. But in saying that, what we've seen from Harrison Petty as a forward this year compared to the back end of last year before he got injured isn't up to the level. Certainly when you're talking about first round picks being involved potentially. So if they see him as a key back, as we have seen during his time as in the premiership side and onwards, very, very formidable defender, but A, hasn't played there much over the last 12 months, and B, the Crows might have enough options down back already. So if the move's there, is he going to be a forward? And then I guess now the big question is, if so, how much are you going to pay for him, both salary cap and in draft capital?
Yeah, especially given his output this year, which has not been great. So next one is probably somebody that's going to be talked about a lot in these trade target videos. So Elliot Yeo, big name.
Yeah, this is probably one of the more fascinating, I think, free agents of this year, just given he's unrestricted. Obviously, he's been in the Eagles for such a long time, premiership player, and then he's really returned to some of the best form of his career to start this year. Still having injury troubles, though, so there's kind of that back and forth between if you can make a move for Elliot Yeo and get the best out of him, it's probably going to be a bargain, just given you're not going to have to give up anything at a trade, given his unrestricted free agency status. But in saying that, you are going to have to pay a pretty penny, I think, to pull him out of West Coast. And if his injuries persist, like we've seen, and I think the last 4 or 5 years he's really struggled and hasn't really had a full season, then that can really bite you as well. So for Adelaide, makes sense. Nice explosive midfielder, would really complement Jordan Dawson, Jake Saligo, and then you've still got your contested ball winners in Matt Crouch and Rory Laird on the inside. And yeah, some of the numbers that Adelaide said to potentially be offering Yeo, according to Ryan Daniels, is significant. A very heavily front-ended deal, 3 years as well, which could be a pretty long time for a guy who's in his 30s and quite injury prone. But sounds like West Coast might only be stumping up a 2-year deal. So if Elliot Yeo's looking at longevity, then he could be certainly considering a move elsewhere. And obviously he's not signed at this point of the season, so he would be weighing something up. But the Crows aren't going to be the only club looking at his services, just given his form this year and his status as a free agent. So they'll have a tough job on their hands to get him, but he certainly would be one that would be a good fit for them. And again, not having to give up anything to get him other than salary cap room is a pretty big plus and a good reason why he won't be short of suitors.
Yeah, and I think bringing in that sort of premiership experience to that midfielder for those like younger midfielders as well is going to be pretty valuable. So another guy that has some great experience and is another big name, Liam Baker.
Yeah, this is the I guess the left field option of the five. Adelaide aren't tied to him at all, and it sounds like he'd either be staying at Punt Road or maybe coming back home to WA. But absolutely no harm in Adelaide asking the question and making a pretty aggressive move to potentially have their name in the mix, and it'd have to be a very large deal, given that it sounds like even West Coast and Fremantle might have pretty significant offers on the table for Baker, as would Richmond, but really just needs to blow everyone out of the water, the Crows, if they want to, if they are going to make a big splash and if they want these kind of players, and that's the kind of gamble you'd take. He can literally play anywhere on the ground. He's one of the best utility players, has been really strong in the midfield this year under Adam Uze, just given the Tigers' injury room has been decimated. But I like him a lot as that roaming half-back option who can kind of push up through the middle. Hasn't been used there as much, just given they've got guys like Dan Rioli and Jaden Short in those kind of roles. So he gets pushed a bit more forward, which he still has a pretty decent impact, but I don't think that's the kind of area you want to be putting a lot of money toward in your squad. So if they're going to make a play for Liam Baker, probably promise him a lot of midfield action. And yeah, can offer a bit of pace, hard-nosed, and great leadership qualities as well. So he'd fit very nicely next to Jordan Dawson in the middle. Not a free agent, which makes it the kind of tough one for the Crows. They'd love to be holding on to their draft picks, especially with Tyler Welsh, father-son tied prospect, set to join them at the end of the year. So they do need draft capital. So this is, like I said, it's left field. It would have to be very aggressive, but you'd also have to be satisfying the Tigers as much as you will need to satisfy Liam Baker to make him consider a move to South Australia instead of WA.
Yep, absolutely. So another one that can play in a couple of different roles around the ground. So Caleb Daniel.
Yeah, so like Petty, South Australian and contracted. We won't usually look at contracted players on these lists, but just given where Daniel's at in that kind of on the fringes of selection, South Australian boy as well. Again, premiership experience and still good quality player. Just there's a lot of similar players at the kennel, and that's one of many reasons why he's been in and out of the side this year. Certainly could be just a utility role, like kind of that role player. I don't think they'd have to pay up much for him, both salary cap wise and then trade capital either, just given that the Dogs haven't always been using him as a best 23 player. So he's a bit of an intriguing one. Unlikely that he would leave, but if his situation turns back to being in the VFL for most of the year, it certainly will spike a bit of interest externally, and certainly clubs from his home state.
Yeah.
And Adelaide, I think would surely consider a move for him, or could be already when they'll probably lose Brodie Smith at the end of the year to given his off contract and falling out of the senior side as well. And Daniel can just offer a bit of run, bit of ball use off half back and slot into the middle on the wing, play half forward. So a bit like Baker, can play anywhere. And he's a cheaper option than Baker as well. Obviously a bit different, but ability to fill roles, they're both very good.
Yep, absolutely. And last one on the list, so another midfielder in Jared Berry.
Yeah, like we said, not really putting too many small names on this list, just given how aggressive Adelaide want to be. And I guess one thing to remember is that these lists, it's not a go get all five. You're probably only pinching one.
Yeah.
It's just names to consider, and you'd like to think they would have these kind of players on their board. Berry is a restricted free agent, which would certainly make it quite hard for them to get him. But in saying that, nice fit, I would have thought, for their midfield group with what difference he would be when we talk about trying to get some run, some outside polish, and he's shown as well his defensive efforts are pretty strong as a head-to-head matchup as well. So you think you can probably keep Matt Crouch in that midfield group. You push Rory Laird to a half-back, and who fills that role alongside Dawson and Saligo, and Berry would be a very good fit. But again, they're going to be needing to cough up probably a fair bit in salary space, which I think they've shown a little bit that they might have with offers for like Will Hayward and Errol Goulden. But then on top of that, if Brisbane do match that bid, then they'd be forced into a trade. So make the gamble. Like I said, if they want to get aggressive, these are the kind of guys they have to go after. Stump up a decent offer and then just hope that Brisbane can't or won't match that bid. They'll probably be pretty happy with some decent compensation. That all comes down to obviously Berry wanting to leave the Lions and then also picking the Crows. So there'd be a fair bit to play out in that regard. But just like the Baker one, just maybe blow everyone out of the water with a surprise long-term deal, and it certainly could work in their favour.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's 5 trade targets for the Crows. No small names on that.
No,
so I think it would be, you'd be pretty happy with any of those, really.
Yeah, exactly. Like I said, you're not going to get all 5, nor would you potentially get one. But it's just an idea or concept and exercise for the Crows. And like I said, they want to make a big splash. These are the kind of players that you need. Certainly improve your list when you look at the list that they have got and the steps that they need to make to finish in September. So there's a bit for them to work with for sure, and it's going to be quite intriguing to see what their off-season looks like at the end of the year, given what they've noted heading into the year and how they've performed, and also some of the names that are now unavailable after re-signing. So it's going to be an interesting period for the Crows for sure.
Yeah, they're a very intriguing team. So that's 5 trade targets. We're going to be doing every team in the AFL, starting with the next one up is Brisbane. So you can catch that. Thanks, Mitch.
Thanks, Phoenix.
And catch all the latest AFL news at zerohanger.com.